Hello and welcome back to, well, I guess my final video of the channel. My name is Daniel and I identify as Homoromantic Asexual. If you're new here, it'd be a very funny new video to pop up on. I've been making videos on Slice of Ace for, I think, if I remember correctly, almost 4 years. I started the channel because, I guess, of two reasons. One, I realized that there weren't many Ace creators out there on YouTube, so I wanted to help be a source of education for people who wanted to know about asexuality and the broader aspect spectrums and communities. I felt like that was valuable for people who may be questioning their identity and maybe aspect themselves, but also for people who just want to know more. The other reason why I started a channel is because I found it very useful myself to have people online who were talking about their own experiences about being gay, about being asexual, when I was coming to terms with my own identity. So, two broad reasons: education and experiences, sharing those personal experiences. And over the last few weeks, as you probably know, I've been doing a series on aspec identities. These have been very informational videos. I've tried to keep it succinct and accurate so it would be a good source of information for anyone who wants that sort of thing. But what I haven't spoken about in a while is myself and my own experience, which I think is why a lot of people come to this channel. So to kind of round everything off, now that I've done the educational series, I wanted to go over my own experience from start to finish one last time. This is probably something that I have mentioned over the course of the channel, and I've probably talked about all these things separately in different pieces, but I don't think I've ever went from the beginning to the end without any kind of breaks in between. If you haven't already been able to tell, this video is completely unscripted, so if you're used to the videos I've been putting out recently, this may be a bit of a departure from that. But I hope that I'm fairly practiced at this point, so I should be able to stay fairly coherent throughout the video. So, me. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I identify as homoromantic asexual. I didn't always identify like this. I guess I should start the story at secondary school. So, up until this point, for the majority of people, they don't really have any sort of notion of sexuality, I suppose. A lot of children are just asexual in the fact that they don't think about sex, and I was very much the same. But when you start getting into your teens, a lot of people then start being more interested in sexuality, interested in having relationships, and all those sorts of things. I didn't. It wasn't something that affected me personally at the time. It wasn't something that I was bothered about. And the only reason I really realised that I was different to other people is because other people were different to me. And what I mean by that is, if you'd put me in a vacuum and I was talking to no one else about their experiences, then I probably would have thought that I was the same as everyone else. And I think on some level I did think I was the same as everyone else. Because your experiences is the only one that you truly understand on a fundamental level, when someone says that their experience is different from your own, it can be a bit difficult to comprehend. Especially if you're not at the point in your life where you're used to considering other people's experiences. So at this point in my life, when I was a teenager, I did not want sex, I did not want relationships, I was perfectly content being alone. being alone, I guess, in a relationship, a committed relationship standpoint, I very much still valued friendships and familial relationships. But in terms of romantic and sexual relationships, I couldn't care less. However, there are things, emotions, experiences that I had at this time, which in hindsight did point towards my homoromanticism. Things like certain conversations I would have with guys where I wanted them to pay attention to me, or thinking someone was like quite good looking and wanting to look at them. But at the time, because I didn't want sex and romance were so heavily, closely linked, I didn't think anything of it. Because in my mind, if you didn't want sex with someone, you weren't attracted to them in that way. So I did have instances where I was romantically or aesthetically attracted to other boys, other guys, but I didn't think that that was actually attraction in the same sense that everyone else was talking about it, because I didn't want sex. I had no interest in sex. But when I look upon these experiences in hindsight, it's a clear indication of my homoromanticism. So I went through the whole of secondary school without really questioning my identity at all. It wasn't really until the tail end of my teens that I started to think more closely about it. And that was more out of curiosity than anything else. It was never something that bothered me to that extent. But I got to university, and it got to the point where I couldn't really deny that I was different anymore. I was talking to people at university, and they still wanted romance, they still wanted sex. And I think some part of me thought, while I was a teenager, thought that people were faking it. That they didn't actually want sex, they just thought sex was cool. Because you see, at this point in your life, teenagers, people around me, my peers, also like were thinking about smoking's cool, or like drinking's cool, or driving's cool, sex is cool. Like it was all in the same bucket of adult things that like teenagers who want to feel more adult should like. And I was never interested in any of that. So you group all these things together, and to me, it was just something teenagers should like. But then when I got to university, when I got a bit more mature, I realized that no, people do actually want sex. You're just a bit different. It took until this time for me to question myself. So I went onto the internet and I basically searched like, I don't want sex. What? I can't remember the exact words that I searched, but it was something along the lines of, is it normal to not want sex? What does it mean if I don't want sex? And that led me pretty neatly, pretty nicely to the Asexuality, Visibility and Education Network, AVEN. And it took a bit of like questioning myself and denial and stuff to work through, but eventually I did accept the fact that I probably was asexual. And looking back at my life as a teenager, I probably would have, if I had the language for it, identified as ace at that time as well. But then I found out about the split attraction model. In finding out about asexuality, I also looked into other things about it, because when I learn about something, I like knowing a lot of information about it. So in learning about asexuality, I learned about the split attraction model, which, if you don't know, is just a framework that is used in the ace communities to communicate more specifically about attraction by splitting attraction into different types. The main two being romantic and sexual attraction. And when I found out about that, I was like, oh, I don't have to want sex to like guys. And I kind of like guys. And that queued up a whole lot of questioning and denial and worry and stress, because now suddenly I lived my whole life up to this point not wanting a relationship, but now suddenly I did, and I didn't really know what to do with that, because sex and romance, they're so closely linked. How am I going to have a relationship that doesn't involve sex? That led me to the identity, which I stick to this day, of Homoromantic Asexual. That is the label that I'm most comfortable with. I did, shortly after coming out as Homoromantic Asexual, start dating. And the way I approached dating at the time was not very healthy. I approached my asexuality as a problem in a potential relationship. I thought that if I wanted to have a relationship, I would either have to find an asexual person like me, or I would have to completely and utterly compromise everything that I wanted or that I didn't want sexually in order to please an allosexual partner. And quite obviously that led me into a relationship that wasn't very healthy either. I was in this relationship for I think a year or so. And I think the other person didn't have the worst intentions, but they wanted to date the version of me that wasn't asexual. I think that they did value me, but I just think that they never really truly accepted my asexuality and thought that it was something that could be changed, or that it was me suppressing something about myself. And so it didn't work out because of that. And it wasn't until I got out of that relationship and I spent some time kind of searching like myself, that I got a better understanding of what I personally wanted out of a relationship. And that's about the time that I started the channel. Because before then, while I was dating and I was in these relationships, and I didn't really have a good idea of what I wanted out of a relationship, I did on some level view my asexuality as a flaw, especially in the context of relationships. Willow, are you trying to like hog all the attention? You're adorable. So I was seeing my asexuality as a flaw. But when I started the channel, I saw other ace people like me, and I started considering what I wanted out of a relationship, and what I was willing to do in a relationship sexually. Not to compromise necessarily, because I know that compromise has a very negative connotation. But asexual people can have sex and they can enjoy sex. It can be physically pleasurable, it can be a bonding experience. And I personally don't have a drive to have sex. But there are sexual activities that I'm perfectly comfortable with. I won't go into them because I think that's a bit too much information. And I've never felt comfortable kind of sharing that sort of thing. I don't think it's necessary to get my point across that there are things sexually that I'm happy doing and that I do enjoy despite not feeling sexual attraction. It does make sex a bit awkward sometimes, I find, because I feel like there's always something missing. Like, I can see the steps where it goes, I guess, where it goes, I find someone attractive, like they're physically, like, they look really good. And then my body reacts to that. My body's like, arousal. It's like, have sex, but there's nothing in my head that says the same thing. There's like a block where I see attractive person, body gets aroused, and then there's nothing. And I feel like that's what I'm missing. That's like the sexual attraction that should happen afterwards. That's like, you should have sex with this person now. Where in my head, it's just like, oh, okay, he's attractive. And now I go on with my day. But I think when I'm very comfortable with someone, I can be honest about that, and I can still have a relationship that's fulfilling, despite the fact that I don't have that drive for sex. And yes, the relationship I'm in at the moment, I am sexually active when I'm with my partner, but I feel like if I wasn't in a relationship, I definitely wouldn't seek sex out. And I didn't when I was single, because it's not something I want for myself, if that makes sense. So I was very comfortable as Homoromantic Asexual for a long time, and for a good portion of my channel. But if you have been watching my channel for a while, I did start to kind of question the asexual side of my orientation. And that's something that I don't know that I'm necessarily 100% comfortable with, but it's something that I'm content with. I don't know if that makes much sense. So, homoromanticism makes sense to me because it is something that I can experience. I know that I want to date guys. I know that I find guys attractive. I know that I want to live with a guy, have a life with a guy. Like, that makes sense to me because it's something I can pinpoint and it's something I have, like, tangible evidence for. But my asexuality is trying to give evidence to something which doesn't exist. It's much harder to prove a negative than it is a positive. So, for the longest time, I have had a lot of doubts that I am actually asexual because I don't have any tangible evidence that that's the case. I just have a lot of evidence. I just have a lack of evidence that it isn't the case. So, asexual, I still use as a label because it's the label that fits me best. It's the label that I'm most comfortable with. It may not be 100% accurate. I don't think I am on the very furthest asexual end of the ace spectrum. I don't think that's necessarily the case. But I don't think I'm right on the aloe end of the spectrum either. And I know that I spent the last few weeks talking a lot about microlabels, but that's not something which necessarily appeals to me personally. I know it's important for a lot of people, and that's why I made those videos, but for me, a vague label which roughly describes my experience and explains it to other people is sufficient. And Willow, can you stop trying to put your bushy tail in my face? So when I was questioning, the label that kind of I nearly changed my orientation to was demi, I think. I think demisexual was probably the closest thing to another orientation I've had. And the reason that was because every instance where I have kind of doubted my asexuality, or I have thought, oh, is this sexual attraction? They've always been in a relationship. And I have a friend as well who thinks that I'm demi-romantic as well, because I don't really get crushes on like celebrities. And the times that I have got crushes, it's kind of been on people I know. I don't think that's necessarily the case because I get very attached to people like on dating apps quite easily. Like I don't need a strong bond with someone. But whatever. Homoromantic is perfectly fine for me. But yeah, it's always in the confines of a relationship where I kind of doubt my asexuality. But over time, I've kind of come to the conclusion that I don't really mind what my label is. Asexual is the one I use to communicate with people, but on a personal level, I'm currently in a committed relationship. I'm happy with where that is, on I guess an emotional level, on a romantic level, on a physical level. So I don't see the need for me to pursue that any further because it wouldn't gain anything for me. Asexual is a label that I think fits me. I may not be 100% asexual according to the definition, but I don't think that matters because it still communicates to people that I feel sexual attraction very little, if at all, and it still feels right to me. It's true most of the time, and I think that's all the label needs to be. So that's kind of the journey that I've been on from my early years of exploring my own orientation to finding out my identity, which I still use to this day, to making a channel about asexuality and talking about it for 4 years on the internet, and coming to the point where I have a label which may not be particularly accurate, but it is the label that I've chosen for myself, and the label that I think is truest to myself. So yeah, I know this has probably been quite a long video. The timer is on 23 minutes at the moment, and I don't think there were many instances that I can particularly cut out. But since it's the last video on my channel, I don't really care about the metrics on this one, and the people who are watching at this point are probably the people who want to sit in a 20-minute video. I hope you didn't mind. Yeah, so this will be the end of the channel, I guess. It's gonna be odd not making these videos anymore, not gonna lie, but I am looking forward to having more free time to pursue other creative avenues. I'm not going to say that this is the last video I'll ever make. I know I've said this is the last video on the channel, which is kind of the same sentence, but I should rather, to be more clear, it's the last video that I'm going to be making on my regular schedule for the time being, which is a very non-committal sentence, but I know at some point in my life I'm going to be I'm just gonna put something out there. I don't know what that will be. Maybe it's gonna be just talking with someone, or like I find someone interesting that I want to talk with. I'm always open to making content with people, to talking to people about asexuality, because I'm in a position where I think, knowledgeable enough to have those conversations, and I'm happy to be a voice for that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't really know what else to say. Feel free to comment whatever in the comments below. I do always read them, and they're always really nice to see. Thank you all for watching all the videos, for subscribing to the channel, for commenting, for giving me ideas, for giving me support. It has been really meaningful to me, because I hope that this has been a space that is comfortable for you to question your identity, and to be comfortable talking about your identity, and to be proud of your identity. And if I have accomplished that for even one of you, then I will be content in the mark that my channel has made. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say today. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all those lovely things, but don't feel pressured, because I don't have any future videos to boost in the algorithm anymore. Yeah, so might see you around at some point. Otherwise, have a nice life, I guess. And big thank you to Willow, who has stopped interrupting me now, but was a very fun presence in this video. Goodbye.